Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rocket Lasso Live, Season 2, Episode 14. And today I have a very special guest. I have Rick Barrett from Maxon. Welcome.
Hey, everybody. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much for coming online with me to answer questions. Rick has been at Maxon, which we just found out, for about 20 years now. Somebody in the comments was like, I didn't even know Cinema 4D was around for 20 years.
Yeah. It was actually on version 5 back then.
Yeah. What was the name of Cinema 4D before it was Cinema 4D?
Fast Ray, Mini Ray, Fast Ray, I think.
Fast Ray.
Fast Ray? Yeah. I can't remember for sure. I think it was Fast Ray.
But
that was before my time, though. I'm not that old.
Yeah. No. Well, you said, I think you said you jumped on version 5, which is I remember when the R6 was coming out on the front of 3D World, the CD that came with 3D World magazine. We are already using it in the classroom then, is right when I started version 6. Hey, sorry for the little technical difficulties, but we are back and we're continuing with a little bit of news because I forget, it starts on April, 20th, Rick, for the
April
C4D Live?
20th. Oh, I'm not sharing my screen to you, am I?
I hadn't clicked that yet. So yeah, go ahead and share the screen.
Yeah,
and
so April 20th. We've got 11 days and 20 hours until virtual NAB. This is exciting. Not quite as exciting as the real thing, but if we can't do that, we'll do this. And it's really cool. We've got a full list. I was just looking at the full list of presenters and presentation schedule. I didn't realize they'd already put this in yet. But some really exciting presenters this year, and we're doing it a little bit different. We're actually going to be doing an hour and a half for each presentation, and that's in order to, the presentations are still going to be about the same length, but we're going to leave a little bit more time for Q&A and for folks to pop in questions that maybe don't even relate to the presentation and try and address those sort of in between the presentation times. So it all kicks off a week from Monday on at 8:30 Pacific time with news and announcements from Dave McGavran.
Yeah, that's going to be excellent. And then we got Andrew Kramer. I didn't realize he was speaking. You got Seth Worley. They got some great names here. Should be good. And then I am going to be still doing my presentation, and I am on April 22nd, and I scheduled it so it's going to be the exact time that this stream usually would be. So that will be the official stream of that week. So that should be fun.
Oops, that's not what the schedule says.
Oh, they didn't update it. Well, I'll poke them. Supposed to be
the schedule's still liable to change a little bit between now and then. So don't lock in your schedule just yet. We'll figure this out, guys.
Yeah, I'll double check it with them too.
Yeah.
And then you had mentioned something about Cineversity. Do you want to cover that too?
Oh yeah. Without mentioning it, because I guess YouTube doesn't like it. During the current situation, Cineversity is free for 30 days to anybody, even if you don't have a Cineversity subscription. So if you go to my.maxon.net or log in through Cinema 4D, you should see an opportunity to add a Cineversity account for a period of time.
Yeah, which is excellent. There's tons of material on there. One of the very first tutorials I ever recorded was actually for Cineversity. I had made this crazy
the tree growing
rig. It's actually how I met Rick and a bunch of people at Maxon. Was I brought that along on a thumb drive to NAB or SIGGRAPH, and it was definitely SIGGRAPH at that time. And I remember I showed somebody I knew, and then she said, "You got to show this to Kai." And then I showed it to Kai, and Kai said, "You got to show this to Rick." And then Rick said, "You got to show this to Paul." And then Paul said, "You should come out to dinner with us." And I've been hanging out with you guys ever since.
The rest is history.
So, and that's still going to be up there. And I mean, Thinking Particles hasn't changed too much since then.
Yeah.
Now there's Field Forces.
It's probably still doable.
It still works. So. Let's see. I guess that pretty much covers it. Does anybody start putting people put the questions back in again? I super appreciate it. And why don't we go ahead and start taking some questions and getting into Cinema 4D, or we'll just see what kind of things we got here. Mick, what do you got? How would you go about creating a bas relief similar to this woman on horseback imagery? This sounds like a similar question that we got last week. Let's see what we're looking at. I'm going to take a look quickly.
It does sound like that one from last week.
Oh yeah, it is. It's actually I guess it's a slight variant on there, and it'd be fun to have a conversation about this. Let me pop the proper screen up. So this is. It looks like some actual Greek and Rome relief. So it's a similar question to last week, where last week somebody showed a black and white image. In fact, here I can show you. Kind of the idea. There's this amazing artist, and they seem to draw these because I found their website. It's going to take me just a moment to pull this up properly. So this is a link from last week, and this artist here, I think that they might be Chinese, but I'm not totally sure. But they have hundreds of these works, and they're these incredibly detailed. Yeah, it's Chinese. So these incredibly detailed relief images. And if you look at this as a depth pass, if you just took this and you put it in the displacement channel, you would end up with an image like this, where there's a lot of dimension, but it's still very flat. But I don't know, Rick, if you were to make one of these, I would think my approach would just be to make a cube or a flat plane and start using the sculpting tool and start like tracing it.
Yeah. I mean, if I was just trying to cheat it quickly, I don't know, maybe if you used one of those tools that takes an image and generates a normal map out of it or displacement map out of it, you could get a good start from there. I mean, it would not be a model, it'd just be a displacement map. But depending on how you were using it, that might be an option.
Yeah, and actually on top of that, I think you could do a pretty good hybrid method, which is if, let's say, you literally had this image and you wanted to bring it in cinema, and I'm not going to do it here because it's just going to be a lot of sculpting time. But if you were to take this and, like Rick is saying, bring it to some sort of app that generates a normal, where it's trying to like analyze the lighting, create a nice normal, that might do a pretty good job. But even if you don't have even that much, if you just took this image, brought it in as a displacement and put it in cinema, it's not going to give you a proper relief, but it's going to give you a lot of detail. And then if you took that and you started sculpting on top of it, like pulling and pushing just a little bit up from the surface, I think you could use that as base reference and create a very shallow depth map on the entire thing. I can't think of any easy way around it, like to do it automatically, except to sort of do it for real. Like these type of things are sculpted by hand, where there's like a chisel, or there's a really cool thing. I've watched some videos online where people are working with like tin and copper, and they'll have like an anvil and a little hammer, and they go ding, 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 and they keep on hammering out and denting these things. So it's like it's like drawing an image, but instead of shading like shadow, you're shading depth, and every strike of the hammer is more depth in the image.
Yeah, and another thing that I don't think that people consider doing quite enough is camera mapping. So you could take this, again, depending on how you're using it, you could take this and just put very basic sculpt underneath it and then camera map this image. Like if you were trying to like take an image that you already had and add some depth to it, you could add camera mapping basically to do that.
That's actually very true. I remember a really old school like tutorial, I think from Maxon, where you could just do some basic camera mapping, and you could have a building with a ton of detail and all these windows and everything. But if you just get the face of it and a couple of key extrudes, the rest of it just sort of is faked in there really well. Like when you play a video game, like everything's incredibly low poly, and the normal map is bringing out a lot of that detail. So if you have if you have the image that we have this reference here. If you just project this and you just do the most basic of sculpting, like just raise the area just a little bit, and you put the image on top of it, it's going to read pretty well. Now, if you're doing super close-ups, zooming the camera around very carefully, it's not going to hold up. But if it's a smaller element within a bigger scene, you could probably get away with not doing that much work on it. But let's go ahead and find some additional questions, see if we can actually get into the software. So let's see, scroll. That was from Twitch, so I'm going to click on YouTube, and let's see what we got here. Oh, that's a kind of Rincon is asking a question that I actually have no idea how I'd even tackle without just super faking it. But it would be, could we make a prism and light with light rays passing through them, where it's like separating out the 7 colors using like dispersion? I don't even know how I would go about doing something like that.
Yeah, remember how we said at the beginning we're not the rendering guys?
That is true, and it is very specifically a rendering question. Like, but even when it comes into that, like a lot of the stuff like chromatic aberration, like that's a kind of a post effect. That's a very specific thing that it wasn't really getting implemented in the software until it kind of became popular as this manual way of doing it. So a prism separating light in that way is so specific that it feels more. It's like you need this very scientific, like, you know, like white paper type of thing of like, oh, here's this exercise and it took like insanely long to compute because we're actually doing the light rays and calculating the different wavelengths of light. Well, right now almost any renderer is going to be any kind of chromatic aberration kind of thing where you get different colors is kind of a fake on top of it, or a very simple algorithm on top of everything. But the idea of calculating all the different rays of light and their different wavelengths in order to separate them out in a prism seems well beyond the scope of any render engine that I'm aware of, if you're going to do it realistically. Now, going and faking it like artistically, like, you know, at that point you can just grab a couple different types of light, make visible light beams and cast those. But that's, at that point, it's almost just straight up artistic and not a mechanical process. But let's go ahead and let's see. Somebody's saying that certain versions of V-Ray might be able to do it. Hey, Darren, how's it going? Rincon, hello. Joel. But yeah, right now, maybe there's somebody who's like an expert in Octane and Octane can do it or something, but that is not me and Rick. So yeah. let's keep going. Michael, how would you approach the stylized tail animation? Let's see what we got here. Sharing my screen. Stylized tail animation. Ooh, okay, we got 2D animation. This is from Henrique Barone. Baroni. I'm terrible with names. Yeah. Henrique Baroni. Let's see what we got.
You're here. Brave saying them out loud.
I do my best. I want to give credit where I can.
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay. So specifically, the question's kind of on this tail. It's really cool. So first of all, this is probably hand drawn. Yeah, it's like 2D character animation. So this was entirely hand done.
Let's see. When I see that, I think a lot about MoSpline and just its ability to do bends and twirls and extend the spline and things like that.
Yeah, totally agreed. What's going through my head would be, how do I articulate this? Imagine if you drew the tail. See all the different motions it's going through? It's kind of traveling through them. So imagine if like this tail curled up and it curls over, it goes up, 90-degree angle, another curve. And then you only ever show a small section of it. And that small section is clamped to, like, you know, here attached to the butt of the cat. And so it's like you're only seeing that section. You're kind of like offsetting what you're seeing, but it's snapping to this particular place. So it's like you're passing through this animation, but it stays sort of static.
Yeah, I kind of follow you.
I'm trying to think. Well, here, I think you'll see quickly. I'm gonna tackle it a little bit here, and you stop me when I'm doing it wrong, because I'm actually not sure how to get to the final step here. So here we are in Cinema 4D R21, and I'm gonna quickly draw. I'm just gonna draw it with a pen tool. So these are not going to be perfect arcs and whatnot. But if I were to draw something like that, and I'm going to counter rotate 90 degrees. Let's go another 90 degrees. And then we'll do, I guess I'll break the tangent there, holding down shift. And we'll go straight up a wee little bit. Go straight up and drag. I do love that you can hit undo while drawing the splines. The old splines, if you drew it wrong, you would have to start again. And I'll just break. So I'm just giving us a little bit of room here, and we'll do one more curve. So that's not super elaborate, but that's kind of a couple different shapes of the tail. Now we have a couple different options here, but actually MoSpline is the one that my brain immediately goes to. If we make a MoSpline, we can set this to spline mode, and in spline mode, feed it a different spline. So we can do something like this. So now we're seeing a new one. Now I'm going to visually hide the original, so we're only seeing MoSpline, and I don't like seeing the full shape, so I can set that to line. So this is actually MoSpline overlaid on the previous one, but you'll see that I can draw this back now. So it's a way of drawing on a spline very nicely. So if we only view, let's say 25% of this, if we offset this, then it's going to travel all the way through. And it actually, overshoots the beginning and end, which is really cool that you can get those, but we can turn them off by saying don't extend the start or end. So by keyframe, so here's the idea. We would start at the very beginning, which is maybe right about there. Maybe I'm giving it some extra, but that's fine. I'm gonna record that. And then let's just say 90 frames later, we've offset to that being the final state. So now you can see we should at any given moment kind of see a cool stylized bit of tail. It's not moving at a consistent speed, but I might be able to fix that by changing this to a uniform spline type. There we go, consistent speed now. It is viewing it uniformly. So if the spline is traveling constantly, my question goes to, how could we essentially, while this is
pin
moving,
the tail on the donkey?
Yeah, exactly. How do we pin this tail on something? So here's a figure. We'll try and put the tail on this thing, but how would we lock it there? We can get the location. Well, okay. If you build a little bit of an espresso rig, maybe it wouldn't be too hard because, and it might lag one frame behind, but we could probably bake it and counter it. But here's my thought is, can we move the MoSpline after the fact? Yeah, we can move that. That's free to move relative to the original one. So if we did something pretty straightforward, like I'm going to make it visual. So I'm going to create a sphere and shrink it down, making an animation tag, aligning it to spline and aligning it to the MoSpline. Then you see it snapping to the end. And as this travels, I think it's going to be stuck right there in the end. But now we have in the world an absolute position. We have this sphere and it's saying its location. Now, if we make sure at the very beginning of the animation that this MoSpline is at the same place that is, actually, no, that doesn't make sense. It'll have to put it into a null. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to hit Alt G to put that into a null and now pull it out. So this null is in the exact same spot as the sphere. If I put that in the null, then that should counter move. Would that need to be a second copy? Because even here, it looks like an offset. Is it going to move? Or is it wherever I move this null? Yeah, if I move the null there, then that's going to travel. It's still in that same spot. But if I were to animate the null, it's going to move that. Is it create a feedback loop? Is my question.
Probably.
So
let's try it. Maybe try a constraint tag instead of Expressa.
Oh, that's interesting. Well, we need to counter animate it though.
Yeah, I mean the other way, and I'm not going to be able to figure out the math off the top of my head, but if you could pull the Mo data for the first point of the spline, because the MoSpline inherently has Mograph data, and then you could use that Mo data, but then you have to figure out sort of the offset matrix between. Sorry, this is getting really nerdy, guys.
No, that's why we're here. That's why you're a guest here.
The difference between the position and the point where you wanted it, right?
Yes, I'm thinking we could skip well, essentially what I've done is I've extracted, we don't need the Mo data because the sphere is now giving us that like absolute position. So if this is now moving sort of two-dimensionally because we drew it two-dimensionally, then the thought is, and then we can't, this sphere is linked to this MoSpline, but now we have this copy, which I'll just rename copy, and which I am completely incapable of typing correctly. There we go. If we move that, you see that this null has the exact same position as the sphere. So actually, do we want these both to be zeroed out? Maybe. If I were to put the sphere into a null, then that's now a 0, 0 the sphere is at 0, 0, 0. If I were to put this null into a null, it is now at 0, 0, 0. Excellent. So those are very clean numbers for us to work from. So if I were to right click at a programming tag, Espresso, gives Espresso a second to pop up. If we take the information of the sphere and feed it into the null, I think it's going to double the effect. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to immediately do it. We can take the sphere, and we're working in 2 dimensions, which is y and x. So let's grab specifically the y, the x and the y, and also for our null, we need the x and the y, and those are their local positions, not their absolute. And local is fine because they're both in the same null for all purposes. Actually, they could literally be in the same null, but that's neither here nor there. Now we can directly connect this, and I think it's going to, what it should do is double the effect. So now you see it's actually moving twice as far. So that's kind of the opposite of what we want. But that means we should be able to just take this value and multiply it by -1. So I'm going to search for a math node, pull in a math, feed in x, feed it out, make a duplicate of that, feed in y, feed it out. So now we've got this in-between node. Select both of them, and I want to multiply by -1. So what that should be saying is do the opposite. So with any luck, hit play, and look at that. The tail is stuck there.
Wow.
So we'd visually hide the original one. Now you just have to make sure your curl is proper. But now you can see we get this really cool animation, and it's going to offset, and all this other stuff was just reference. There might be we might be able to remove a few steps from there, but it is now stuck on the, and there's not even a frame of lag. I thought maybe it would twitch a little bit, but it's doing a proper order of operations. So yeah. And it's really, what's neat about this rig is we could at any point go back to this spline and modify it. So if we didn't like the curve or change something, updating this, it'll change the speed a little bit because of the length of the spline. But yeah, I could hit T for scale here. Undo T for scale, scale that up, move it here. And now we got a larger section there. Rewind and hit play, and it should just update. So besides the speed changing, that should just pretty much work and be largely, you can just update it and make it do whatever you want. And now you got spline, you can sweep it, or, and this MoSpline only exists as this limited segment. So if we make an end side, feed in a sweep. So we've got that, feed in the sweep, feed in the end side, T for scale. Oh yeah, I always forget with the MoSpline is feeding thickness animation or thickness information. So I'm going to turn off rail scale, and now it's going to be controlled via the end side. So I can scale this up to whatever scale, use the sweep and do an end growth of, not end growth, an end scale of 0. And now you got a full on tail here. And it, you know, that can be any geometry, anything you want to render, and it should just automatically work. Excellent. I wasn't sure we'd have something there, but it worked pretty well. I'm going to give this a save for anybody who's watching. These scene files are all available on Patreon. So just a heads up there. And then me and Rick have a shared Dropbox folder here. So if at any point we need to swap files, we can do that. So stuck tail. Cool. Excellent. Thanks very much for the question. That was neat. I mean, there might be some cool applications of that. I've never really thought about it. And I bet you there's a slightly more simplified way of doing it. But it did work.
Yeah. I can't think about a simplified or off the top of my head, but MoSpline is just so awesome because it's so flexible, and I really think that it's got a lot of power that people don't tap as much as they probably could.
I totally agree. And I mean, honestly, I ignored it for a long time. And there are several things that MoSpline can uniquely do. And the big ones being remapping another spline. You can also use it as a very manual way of resampling a spline. Yeah. Where you can, if you have a point that's got way too many points and you want them to be very evenly distributed, you can use a MoSpline to do that.
Yeah, I've got a tutorial on Cineverse that does something like that for remapping, to do like an audio visualization. Being able to remap a low density spline into a smoother, like Akima spline or something like that. So
yeah, it's
really lots of stuff you can do with MoSpline.
Do you in any way remember how to use turtle mode?
Yeah.
Do you think you could do a quick turtle mode demo? Because I never know what to do with it. Because I bet you most people have not even put it in the turtle mode, or they did it like, I don't know what this is, and they immediately go away.
Turtle mode's one of those that's going to embarrass me quickly, but basically, you go in here to turtle mode, and the idea here is just like when you did logo, or I don't know, I'm old enough that I did logo in school. So you know how you move the turtle forward and then turn it right and then move it forward again. So like if we do F, for instance, you see that it moved forward that amount, right? And if we do F again, it's going to move forward double that amount. And if you go into the values here, you can say the default movement. So we can say what that is. Well, if we go in here and see, I forget. I always have to look at the help, which any good thing to know. I'm sure most of you do. You can just right click on any parameter and show help, and
help's all online now, so it can get updated, which is wonderful.
Yeah. So how do we turn F H? It's this code actually, it's not arbitrary. It actually relates to a book called, or it's more than a book, but it shows up in a book called The Algorithmic Beauty of Plants. And all of these types of, this is like sort of a normal scientific nomenclature for this somehow. Turtles. So plus and minus basically rotates us. So if I go F plus F, see how it rotated there? And the default value is here. So I can change this angle here to change how much that is going to rotate. So if I do, let's say 30, right? And then I do plus F, I'm going to get another, and I can just keep doing that, right? Well, I can also say that A equals F plus F, and then I can just say here A. But I can make this recursively. So I can say B equals FA. And then if I put B here, it's actually saying B equals FA and A equals F plus F. I can have B equal FAA, and it just kind of, so you can create these sort of intricate interactions. And I have a tutorial on Cineversity that I'm not going to be able to reproduce right off the top of my head, where we actually create a tournament bracket out of Turtle. And the cool thing about it is that Turtle, you can actually, there's options for setting where a Mograph object is going to appear. I forget how you do that off the top of my head. It's been a long time since I played with Turtle. But you can set where a Mograph object is going to be created. And it'll actually, you can put different Mograph objects at different points within the Turtle. Yeah, you can kind of see this is an example of that. So you can create 4 different groups, I, J, K, and L. So if we did like B equals F, I, A, then we clone onto this. Let's grab a sphere. And we'll go into object mode, clone onto it. And then,
how do you limit it to a particular flavor?
That's what I'm trying to remember.
Interesting. I did not realize.
See, even I have to use the help, guys. So A premise is FA. Let's just do this one here real quick. A equals FX and X equals that. And how do we set the index.
Maybe there isn't an index. It's just like the first object is cloned on the one. So if you put a cube, maybe certain things are on the cube, certain things are on the sphere.
Yeah, all these things need to be a lot smaller. Actually,
maybe that was just a random guess, but interesting.
Yeah. Anyway, we probably should focus on things that we know how to do rather than reading.
Yeah, reading
it. Can do this on their own time.
Yeah, that's why doing the bonus stream is.
But
just reading
there are some. I think the benefit here is to just so that people understand that this exists as a possibility. There is the ability to create these stochastic spline systems and putting clones at specific points in that spline system. And if you really want to understand it better, I think that tournament bracket tutorial on Cineversity helps to explain it a lot better. And I created it at a time when I actually understood all of this a lot better. My memory is a little fuzzy on all this MoSpline stuff. It's been a while.
Watching your own tutorial is it's what we do.
Yeah, totally.
The amount of times I've rewatched my own UV unwrapping tutorial.
Yeah.
For like that once a year, you have to do it. Well, if you can you track down the link to that Cineversity tutorial, and I'll go track down the next question here.
Sure.
But just so people can go check it out. Let's see. That's very specific to this. Nicholas is asking, how would we might make a dripping drool effect, like a elastic liquid. So like kind of like that cartoony drip that might come down. Let's see. I'm gonna put us up on screen while you're searching, Rick, and then let's think about that. If you find a link, you just put that in Twitch.
Sure.
If we're doing, I kind of like that idea though. We could do like an elastic, cartoony drip, like if a dog had a bunch of slobber or something. What would be? I'm splitting your attention, but how would you go about doing that, Rick?
Sorry, I'm gonna put this in Twitch, and then you have my attention.
Okay.
What am I looking at?
Okay. So first of all, there's the link, and I'll have that link in the show notes as well on YouTube when you're watching this on YouTube in the future. Bye-bye. And let me make sure that doesn't. Yeah, cool. Okay, so essentially like a cartoony drip, like if something like a cartoony dog slobber where there's like a big drop on the end of a line. What would you be your go-to for making something like that? Like, let's say we're going real cartoony, elastic, and springy.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I go to after watching the success you had with the candle stuff last week would be a rig kind of like that is actually creating sort of a dynamic rig, maybe with the soft body of clones connections.
Oh yeah.
And then you could have a thicker object at the bottom and then make the objects thinner as the drip goes up so that you get some profile, and then put it into a volume object maybe.
Yeah, I like that. There'd be the full, because the quick version that popped in my head would just be using hair dynamics, because you could very quickly do that. And I think that has like a pretty good elasticy rubberiness to it. And then you could just sweep a spline onto it and then thicken it up on the tip. But that spline doesn't have relative thickness. It's an absolute thickness throughout the entire spline. And it will interact with some colliders, some very specific hair body colliders, but it's not going to interact with other dynamic objects. It's not going to stick to it or be attracted to it in any kind of dynamic way. So if you build an entire chain of them, then you could directly control them very directly.
Yeah, and I think with the soft body springs, like those can break at a certain point, right? So you'd actually be able to have the slobber like drool down and then break, and you see the drip.
Actually,
maybe
We got to make this. That's a really good point. That suddenly made it interesting enough where it's like, okay, we should make something now. And Travis, there was no visual reference. We're just trying to make like in a cartoony dog slobbering where he's like, rah, and there's like a big drip coming down. And we just want to make a kind of big cartoony elastic drip that I think we can even make fall away and be blobbing into things. Let's see. How do we want to try and divvy this up, Rick? Do you want to start this one out, or should I build the chain and then you can take over once we get to the volume step? What do you want to do?
Why don't you start?
Okay. Let's pop up my screen here. Okay, here we are. There's the previous question where we had the animated tail for anybody who might have just jumped in. And then now let's open up a new file and let's start working on the elastic drip. Now, this is gonna be pretty low poly. It's not gonna be that many, but we could make more. I've been very inclined lately, ever since I started this technique. I've been very inclined lately to always work from a cube whenever I can. If we're gonna be feeding it to a volume, then the cube is giving us tons of information. If we want to round it, we can always give it a single segment and make this sphere-esque. And the really fun part here is, and I'll even show you, we were talking about this a little bit last week, but if I were to make a floor, let's make this a little more visual and let it place on the ground. I'm going to make both of these dynamic objects, simulation, a rigid body. So you'll see if I play that this is a cube and you see it hits a floor and it stops and it behaves like a cube. But we can actually go into the dynamics tag, and currently the shape is set to automatic, which actually, Rick, you might be able to clarify this, is how it decides what the shape is, because this is a cube and maybe it just automatically is hard coded to say, hey, you're a cube, you are calculated as a box. Because when we run the visualize on here, I think if we hit Alt V, we can Control or Command D, and you go to dynamics, you can go to visualize and enable this, and we hit play and we can see how it's visualizing the dynamics. And you can see it's actually drawing a green box around it. So it is being calculated as a box. So I'm just curious how it decides that. But we can manually go into the dynamics of the cube and say, okay, you are a box, but I want you to be calculated as an ellipsoid. So pretty much as a sphere. So when we hit play, you can see that's actually got this low poly version of it, but ignoring the visual of that, you can see now that this cube is rolling as if it's a sphere. So that means it's going to calculate incredibly quickly. And just through my own testing, it's my assumption that spheres calculate the quickest. But mathematically, it's just a radius. Like, am I colliding with this radius? Very simple math. The second quickest is going to be cube-based, because calculating a box is really quick. Cylinders are probably also incredibly quick because these are mathematical objects.
Yep.
So that's my assumption. So based on that, we can say, hey, this is going to calculate as fast as it possibly can because it's a cube. We'll round it out a little bit just to help us visualize the round effect. And the Fong bugs me, so I'll delete the Fong tag. So now let's start making a chain of these. We'll do this very cleanly. I'm going to make a duplicate. I made it exactly 10 tall so I can make a copy, move it up 10. And there's no, I wrote a script for myself and I have a tutorial about this. Actually, I did a SIGGRAPH presentation once about this. And I also did a recent presentation for automating this process. But let's do this manually for anybody who's not too familiar. We're going to go into the simulate menu and grab a connector. So this is now a connector that we're going to connect between these two objects. I'm going to move it up 5 units, so it's in between. And I want this to be a very free rotating connection. So I'm going to set it as a ball and socket. So this should be able to just freely connect from the first object to the second object. So just for, I guess for clarity, we should probably travel downward, not upward. So the second one, I'll say, which one's the original? That's at 0, 0, 0. So I'm going to move this down. And I'm going to go negative just for us to be organized. So I like visually leaving these in between. So I'm going to set this to -5. So with this connection, if I grab the top one and we name this one the base, I'm going to tell it dynamically, it is still dynamic, but it's not going anywhere. Dynamic is off. So now the second one is connected to the first one. You see it's not moving anywhere. I do want to make sure nothing moves. So, or I want to make sure that it doesn't turn off by accident. So we've got this deactivation value, which is really important because it will speed up your simulations. But for this case, I'm going to say I want it calculating all the time. So it will never deactivate with values of 0. So I'm going to play, and we don't really see much, but if I were to move this, you're going to see that our second one is connected and it's going to wiggle around. So I'm going to undo and reset back to 0. And now we're going to duplicate this more times. So I'm going to put that as a child. Let's make a duplicate of that and scoot it down 10 units. I can hold down shift and automatically do that. And I need to make sure that this is connected from the parent to the child. And now I can grab both of those and make a double duplicate there, move them down 20 units. Actually, let me make sure this works. I'm going to grab the upper one because that's the only one that should need the new parent, and link the parent and the child. And let's see if it falls away or if it does sort of work. Also, I'm going to create a turbulence right now just so we can see some motion. Forces, turbulence. Set that to 55, which might be a lot. But yeah, okay, those are connected. But I think I did mess up a connection. I'm glad this happened. There's a very important thing with cinema, and it's super logical why it does this. There's a bad connection happening right now. And the reason for that is I took these two objects and I control copied them. So what happened is it made a duplicate, but with everything kind of still existing in the scene. So this connector didn't do a relative connection to the previous cube. It's still connected to what it was originally, but we can get around that really easily by selecting those two objects. And instead of control dragging, just copy, paste, because now it's been copied to the clipboard and then pasted back in. So all those like references that they had to each other are broken and they're only related to each other, which means this time when I click on this connector, hopefully we'll see that it is connected to 2 and 3, where before it was probably on 2 and cube. So with that in mind, we only have to fix the top connector. Now, the good news here is every time we do this, it's going to get quicker and quicker. So let's hit play, make sure the connections look better than last time, and they do. Let's do it again. And
I'm wondering, Chris, ultimately, though, if we want, before you go too much further, I'm wondering if we want springs so that we can break them off and have them stretch.
Yes. That is a excellent point. I'm glad you stopped me because I would have gone all the way and been like, wait a minute, we should have been building springs. And in fact, I don't. That's what I'm here for. Yeah, I don't even think we want connectors, to tell you the truth. We just want springs. So
yeah. In fact, I'm wondering if we can use the rigid body, the dynamics soft body made of clones.
Oh yeah. Does that will make the connections, but could we scale them? And we can't. Oh wait, there's a break.
There's the elastic limit.
Yeah. That's true. That is true. There's a lot of different paths to take on this one. I would actually. Would you like to demo the Mograph, the MoDynamic version?
Sure, let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I want to stress the reason I want to do this is mention this is because I was really, really late to the party when it came to MoDynamics. MoDynamics actually came out half a version before regular Dynamics, I think, and I ignored these because it's a very basic tool. It doesn't do that much, but you can actually do some incredible things if you use MoDynamics. And I've only ever talked about it a couple of times. So let's let Rick steer from here.
Yeah. So I've just got a simple linear clone here on a cube and I'm cloning downward, and let's go ahead and add a step effector just so that they can get a little bit bigger each time. And I like to make this just a linear spline usually. But we probably don't want it to be quite so much, maybe like that. And then we'll go ahead and add a rigid body or soft body tag to this. And we want to switch the soft body here from made as polygon lines to made of clones. And then, like Chris was doing before, we want to make sure individual elements is all. We'll go ahead and set this to ellipsoid. And then trying to figure out the best way to connect it to. We would just want to use a connector for the first clone.
Can't you just put a Mograph selection and make some of them not dynamic?
Yes, that's a good call.
Which is one of the things that's super amazing with MoDynamics. You guys know I'm frustrated all the time that soft bodies are so amazing, but it doesn't have like the belting options that we have with cloth. But it's kind of like with MoDynamics, you do. So
right. So I selected with the Mograph selection. I'm selecting the bottom 3 here, and that should So now those are the dynamic ones. And now if we take the cloner, I'm just curious, can we just animate this?
I'm not 100% sure. Maybe. Change the time.
Alt drag to change the time, guys.
Alt dragging makes it so it doesn't refresh the viewport. Yeah, look at that. Automatically dynamic, there we go. And it's essentially belted, and they should automatically be connected.
And then it's just a matter of going in here to the soft body, and we can do things like adjust the elastic limit or the stiffness. Let's see here. Elastic limit. If we bring this down a lot, will they break, I wonder?
I don't know. Go to 0. Well, that's going to make them just fall apart. 0 structure means there's no springiness between them, so it's a full break. But is there a breaking point? Well, what we could probably do is
look at that. I'm seeing something start to happen there.
What is happening?
I think it may just be the dampening or the lack of dampening.
But I mean, it's like they're breaking, but they're not fully breaking.
Yeah.
That's interesting. A thought I had would just be using fields and changing the Mograph selection. So at a certain moment, it could be like, oh, I'm not dynamic. I guess I would turn it off. There is a way of breaking them, I thought. Well, before we worry about breaking them, show how easy it is to like get a whole chain of these.
Yeah, so we can just increase the clone count here. And let's do this too. Let's add some wind. Maybe you need a fall off.
Oh, your selection tag, your new clones might be static.
Oh, right. Good call. So Mograph selection. Yes, they aren't painted there.
I wonder if it would be worth turning on fields and setting it to like everything above a certain point or something to automatically update that.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's use fields and we'll clear that, and let's just let's actually just use a formula field, and we can just use ID if ID equals 0 or ID less than 1. That should just grab the first clone.
Yeah.
Except,
do we need the inverse of that? You could just make I guess it could be ID does not equal 1.
Yes, that we need the inverse. You're right. So ID greater than 1.
Yeah.
There we go.
Nice.
Then we'll go back here and
I never thought to use greater than 1 or greater than or less than in there. Now, in this case, we're just using these in a 2-dimensional or in like an align way, but you can also make like a whole blanket out of these, and it's they're pretty good, and they calculate really quick.
Yeah.
There's a weird almost drift on it, but that could be the wind. Or no, you got rid of the wind.
I got rid of the wind. I think it's just the sort of the randomness of dynamics. And actually, the first 2, this is important to realize, the first 2 are actually not dynamic right now. So we need to be ID equals greater than zero because Mograph's 0 based for the indexes. So that means the first one is 0 and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Can you put a few extra frames on here so we can see the overlap when it reaches the end?
And then the cool thing here too is that we could actually put colliders in here that it's gonna interact with. So we could go in here and just put a where'd it go? Put a whoop. I meant to do a collider.
Oh, doesn't quite bonk. There you go. But yeah, if you put a little less, I'm curious.
You want to take over from here?
Maybe, yeah. Let's try doing a Dropbox transfer. We haven't done that. Something I'm curious about is actually, I just have no idea. Do you know how the MoDynamics decides what should be connected?
I don't, off the top of my head.
Yeah, I've always been curious about that. Slobber Rick, there you go. Okay, well, that's the Dropbox workflow is very nice. Let's see, just to see some. Okay, so that's moving. We're getting the leftover. The formula is working great. The step effector is controlling the scale, which is great. We can make those pretty big. What I'm curious about is if we also make that change the position. So as they get bigger, they'd have more room to move forward.
Yeah.
What am I doing wrong here? They should move forward. Yeah, they're going to move forward.
You're still showing my screen, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I think.
There we go. Sorry, right screen. There we go. Okay, all I was doing was tweaking the step effector. So, what am I doing here? Maybe we need 2 step effectors, one to do the scale and one to do the position. So I'll do that. Duplicate the step. I always like to rename it. That'll be the position one. And inside the effectors, we do that. So now we'll have one that affects the position and one that affects the scale. And the reason for that is I think we kind of want the opposite to happen to one of them. So I'm trying to think of a clever way of inverting it. I can invert the spline, but can I do it that way? I have a very specific reason for wanting to invert it that way because I want to control it. What am I doing wrong here? I want each one, if it's going to scale more, it should move further down, is what I'm doing. If it's moving down, if it's scaling up, it should move more down. That's moving up, so that's moving more down, but they're all moving. The step is nice and linear. I mean, it is doing it. Oh,
it's maybe you actually want a curve in this case because those smaller ones are.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We're definitely going to be able to art direct the drip because this is going to remap to all of them. And this is actually interesting. Oh, it's super interesting because as I add more in the count, they're moving up more. Yeah, I'm getting a little sloppy here, but now we should be able to move these down, get some reasonable distance. Are these actually colliding with each other as dynamic? Yeah, they do seem to, and it suddenly explodes. Why does it break up there? Are they getting too heavy? I'm curious if they are.
I feel like they are. I think that's what's happening here.
I'm going to give them a custom mass of 0. See if that does anything. Well, it's different. Yeah, it's interesting. It's different than your basic chain. I'm just resetting some values back to default to see what we get out of the box. Well, it's connected now. Maybe the elastic limit seemed to do something. It was stretching a little bit too much at one point. So these do seem to ignore their direct connection. I don't know if they ignore each other all the way up. But as we make this, we are easily able to make this chain, the step effector, we can art direct the drip shape by saying it should scale more. We have it scaled down at the very tip. And it could be larger here, but it should wait a while before it suddenly gets really big near the end. Making these changes not at the time of 0 can be weird. Now this change of position is strange, so I'm going to go easy on that. Or just turn it off. And we'll have them go negative. So there we go. Now, if they're ignoring each other, then pretty much that's just our shape. They do seem to separate out a little bit. I'm not sure. I'd have to. I don't play with these enough. Maybe that elastic limit was doing it, but do you see? I guess the thing that's throwing me off is this. Do you see how this is getting ahead? That curve goes further ahead. That's a little strange to me. But based on some of my tests in soft bodies, nope, still happens. I found that stuff happens in the damping can cause that. But I just noticed there's a special setting that has appeared, which is tear out length. So that's actually what we wanted to be using. But I do agree that stuff like the follow position and all this damping can introduce those kind of overlaps. But it doesn't seem to be turning. I don't know. It's kind of weird where it suddenly accelerates. Could be some sort of feedback loop in here. And the point being is it doesn't feel like it's behaving exactly as if we were putting a bunch of connectors between them. Mm-hmm. But of course, these aren't connectors. These are probably using more like the soft body springs, aren't they?
Yeah, that's what it is.
So here's what tear out length. So if it stretches more than 200%, it'll probably break. Yep. So it snaps right away there. Break. So if we lengthen this up a little bit, then it doesn't quite stretch 500 units there. So I bet you if we were to try and chop this thing, like with this, I can make this a dynamic object. Let's see if I can just go chop. Nope, that's not forcing it far enough away. I can't break it like that. By if we had a wedge shape, that might work. But right now it's just cutting through. So cutting through doesn't do it, but pulling it away that little bit would. But even having said all that, is there the tear out length has a map that we can feed it.
Mm-hmm.
So can we feed it a Mograph weight tag? Is that what it can be fed?
I'm not sure, to be honest with you. Let's see.
Let's find out. Okay, so we got a Mograph weight tag. Oh no, it doesn't accept it. No, it doesn't accept it at all. That's too bad.
So if we're basing it on clones, the map's not really helpful in this case.
It's interesting that it has a map.
Well, it's for when you're doing a mesh-based soft body. So you can have certain parts of the mesh be more or less of each parameter.
But you can do a soft body made of clones?
No,
like not like a mesh.
The map parameter probably should just disappear when the soft body is made of clones.
Okay.
But it's when the soft body isn't made of clones.
Yeah, interesting. I'm just trying to think of some way we could break that connection because besides what we just did, because here's our selection, and that's what's dynamic or what's not dynamic, but it's not tear parameter. That's not going to separate them. Mm-hmm. So it's just the only thing I can think of would be this tear out. We could feed a vertex map, but a vertex map is meaningless on this type of model.
Right. No, I mean, I think our best bet is to do what you were doing, but maybe do it with like a wedge shape instead of a plane. Because the plane, the problem is that the dynamics are only happening on the plane side. It's, it doesn't have any thickness. So.
Yeah. Now, having said all that, besides this little curve we're getting, which I'm still not quite sure what's causing that, but this drip and rubberiness is really great. Like these are all the default settings. I got rid of the damping from everything, but if we were to change the structural, then we could have them tighten up a lot more. The more structural, the more these are not going to want to be stretchy. And with no damping, that means it's really rubbery. If we put a lot of damping, that's going to drain the energy out from the system really quickly, and it won't be nearly as springy. And the lower that is, the more it can stretch. Now, having said all that, what's neat about this system is we were really easily able to shape this, and that this really is, these do have this depth to them. At least I'm hoping they do. I'm going to give ourselves a little bit more, a few more frames. You'll see that this is colliding with these thin ones here, but it's colliding with the fat ones down here. So dynamically speaking, this is a pretty robust series of connections. So where this gets interesting is if we were to throw this right now directly into a volume, it wouldn't work very well because you're going to see we have all this separation between all of our different clones here. But what I hope we should be able to do really easily is create a tracer object. And I've been doing this a lot lately, is by creating a tracer with the cloner. If I say connect all elements, or maybe it's connect all objects. There we go. You can now see that we get the line interconnecting every single one of them. So instead of running the volume on, and let's have that calculate afterward. Instead of running the volume stuff directly on each of these clones, we can do it on the tracer because they're all interconnected. And just we could do the line and give the line thickness in that. But if we want to visualize this even more, of course, this would stop us from doing the break. But let's just say we're not doing the break here. We can sweep it, of course. So creating a end side, so we can control exactly how many sides there are, and a sweep, drop that as a child, drop the tracer as a second child. T for scale this down. And now I'm going to control, I make it as fat as the fattest point of all of our clones. And then via our scale, and we could use like Espresso or set driver, set driven to make this arc completely match the arc inside of our step effector. But I'm just going to eyeball it. So it's definitely going to arc up here and then get thinner at the end. And let's scoot this more here so we get that drip shape. There you go, something like that. So now we've got, oh yeah, and this pulls down a little bit. There we go, get the nice drip shape. So now we can get this goopier looking drip. And, oh, that was weird. It wasn't refreshing right away. The tracer doesn't seem to like acknowledging the mode dynamics until it's, oh, that's interesting. Let me think of what might be the cause of this. What might be the cause? I'm going to turn off the deactivation, but I don't think that's going to be it. That does suddenly... It's not doing it while it's keyframed. As soon as it stops being keyframed, let's see if it changes if it collides earlier as well. No, it seems to... Oh, it doesn't like the keyframes. As soon as it's not keyframed, it's suddenly working. But that's odd. Yeah, it's too bad. The tracer is one of those things where it's like it doesn't... The order of operations. I really wish we could expose the order of operations on the tracer.
Try connect all elements instead of connect all objects on the tracer.
I don't think it even showed it, but let's see.
Oh, okay.
Connect element, connect all object, connect elements.
No.
Connect all objects. Once it's not moving, it's suddenly fine, but it doesn't like moving. Interesting. I can't think of...
You know, if we go back to doing it with volumes, the cool thing would be we could actually randomize the cube size a little bit, so you could get like globby parts, not just at the end, but get them like in the middle too.
Yes. I want to be able to connect those. We'd have to start feeding a lot more. I'm going to turn off the tracer temporarily. But if we make the volume, if this starts stretching really far apart, there's no way those are going to blob into each other.
Yeah.
So that's going to turn into, we need these to be potentially
more structural,
incredibly structural, 500 structure. So these should get really stuck to each other. And then we're losing a lot of our distance, and they still might actually get reasonably stretchy if we just make more of them. So we'll just increase that. So now maybe there's enough distance between them to be able to do it. Yeah, what do you mean by the randomness in them? I'm going to go ahead and save this.
Okay.
Yeah, you take over again. So
sure.
Here's B. And I'll remember to switch the screen this time. Save. And back to Rick.
So I was just thinking, if you go in and you add a random effector, and we'll turn off position, but turn up scale, and maybe this is, well, we can just make it 1, and then we'll just bring the strength down.
Oh, that's cool. That's really straightforward. I was thinking way more complex.
And then, so you're going to get some more globbies. And actually, what I might do, instead of using a random effector, is do a plane effector and then use a random field, because then we could actually use the noise to art direct it a little bit more.
Oh, yeah. I was telling the story the other day of when the first version of Mograph came out, there was no plane effector. Which, when you think about it today, is insane. And back then, everybody was taking a shader effector and feeding it like just a white material, and that was the plane effector. It was like, why would anybody need a plane effector? But once you add in the idea of fall-offs and
totally
and fields,
yeah. I mean, and it's actually like, other than the fact that the random effector can go in all three directions individually, that's really the only reason why the random effector needs to be around anymore. You can just use a plane effector.
Yeah, otherwise you have to replace it with 3 plane effectors.
Yeah.
Do you want to do the volume stuff here?
Sure.
Although
Let's
it's
go ahead.
to a pseudo explode, or it's I guess they're all spinning, so we have to think about it in a uniform way. But
so let's bring this down to like 6, and smoothing's gonna be
smooth will obliterate things, so we're gonna have to go super easy on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to like using the smoothing deformer to do like a post smooth rather than this when you have to. That should, yeah. Uh-oh, it doesn't like the refreshing in there either. It doesn't like the keyframe, which is interesting.
That is really interesting.
I'd have to think about that. There might be.
What if we do it this way instead? Does that?
It probably will have to be baked to fully acknowledge it. And sometimes you have to even go to a Lemic before it will acknowledge it. Like the candle thing didn't like.
I also just wonder if we remove the keyframes here. Oh, I guess I got it. And then just keyframe it here instead.
I'm just curious if it, like anytime it's being keyframed, it won't. Yeah, it's not acknowledging anytime it's being keyframed, and as soon as you're off the track, then it's like, okay, now I can refresh. So it's causing some sort of feedback loop in the refresh, I think.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about the priorities and think about why that would be happening.
Yeah, we could totally, baking the dynamics, keyframe it within the cloner. That's an interesting idea. I'm also curious if the field might be breaking it because we're feeding it through a field instead of its set original selection. And maybe as it's refreshing, it like that field doesn't go. There's a lot of different things that could be variables on that.
I also good thing to check is just make sure that we don't have anything that we don't realize is keyframed. No.
Yeah, follow position. I mean, well, that's interesting. A couple people in the chat are saying they're trying to think of ways around using keyframes, like using a constraint tag on it or a follow position. My guess is anything that's causing it to refresh, it's not going to like. Not specifically keyframes. In this case, keyframes is what's causing it, but I don't think it's limited to keyframes. Would be my guess. Yeah, interesting.
The somebody posted in chat. I guess some Everfresh on Twitter had done this using spline dynamics. So this is, I think the advantage this has is, well, you could still do it if you cloned on this spline. You could do a mix of the techniques if you cloned onto the spline, but I actually kind of like the idea of being able to sort of vary the width at spots with this.
Well, dynamically do that. I mean, a lot of it does go back to, like, I really enjoy the Mo dynamics being able to do their thing. But if we went back to the original technique of these just being dynamic objects linked by springs or by connectors, then it would just be working. Like that, right. That does just straight up work. So we went with the more iterative method, but it's probably ultimately the one that won't work quite as well. For this case, because we're trying to push it further. And once we're using connectors and whatnot, you could just break any connector you want at any given point.
Right.
So yeah, Everfresh does it, and somebody put the link in Twitch if anyone wants to check out what somebody might have done with that version of it. But I would like to get to more questions. We're kind of getting to the meandering point on this one, so let's see what it is. Yeah, I do agree.
Here,
we could.
Yeah,
I tried moving the ball so that wouldn't refresh it, and Chop is saying, well, if it was baked, I think it would probably work if it was baked. And if that didn't work, it would work if it was alembic baked. That almost always will force it to go. But in any case, I'm going to scroll around, find another question in here. I know somebody really likes a question that Level Bubble asked, and they've been re-asking it.
Do you want to switch back to your screen?
Yeah, before I forget. Thanks. Smecca's in the house. Hello. Andrew is here now. Pro Tools. Dean. Sky. Hello. Got lots of people hanging out. Meeks. Sorry, I'm trying to find the question that people are reposting. Okay, Dean reposted. So, best approach to texturing both sides of a cloth surface with thickness. Oh, that's an interesting question. So if you were to be running like a soft body sim and then you use cloth to create thickness, is there a way of texturing one side differently than the other side? That's a good question. I'm not sure I have an answer. I have one thought that immediately pops into my head, and I don't know if it'll work, but it's super quick to test. So here I have a plane in Cinema, and I'm going to create a selection tag. So now there's a selection tag on everything there. So that's only that current geometry. So if I were to create a cloth surface and feed this in, it is now creating new geometry. All of this is like an extrude, which would not be part of the same selection. So based on that theory, if we make two materials, make one of them blue, leave the other one white, and I apply both of them, and now I take the secondary material and limit it to the polygon selection. No, it didn't work. That's kind of all I had.
I'm wondering if we could do it with fields somehow.
Fields. Oh. I mean, the trick here is we can't make the cloth editable. If we make the cloth editable, it ceases to be the cloth surface. So that's the limiter. And can fields affect the texture on something that hasn't been made editable? That's my question. A correction deformer. Am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, I could see a correction deformer working.
Wait, but this is about textures. Why would a correction deformer work?
Well, you could use a correction deformer to set the selection, theoretically.
But that's point selection. It's not poly selection, right? Correction deformer is only points. Or is it also polys? Is it also polys? And I never realized. Let's find out. Set selection. And then, well, that creates a selection, but we can't still limit to that. That's creating the selection. Well, first of all, if you can do polygon selections in a correction deformer, I had no idea you could do that. So that's really cool. That's neat. I'll have to think about that because that might have some really neat applications.
We taught Chris something.
I had no idea. I'm assuming then it also has edges. I thought it was only points. And this thing's been around forever. I use a correction deformer all the time. You can trick like Mograph in a bunch of ways. If it will not acknowledge a mesh, you can say, well, here's a correction deformer. It's like, oh, okay, I'll acknowledge that. So that actually has some neat implications. But this selection only exists on the correction deformer. We're not texturing the correction. We're texturing the cloth surface. So...
yeah, and I thought maybe you could just copy the selection up, but it doesn't work.
Yeah. And because it won't transfer to a live object. So even if we made this field, I'm going to take this and make this field driven, and that's field driven, drag in the selection tag of the correction deformer to transfer that as a polygon selection. Even that, I don't think, that's not going to have any effect because it has to be editable. All these things we're doing would work if we made it editable. So it just goes to cloth isn't going to let you do that. Now, cloth is not technically the only way of adding thickness in cinema. What are some other ways? Parametric-y ways. I mean, there's the isn't there a Cineversity like parametric extrude?
Yeah. Well, there's the solidify. There's actually on Maxon Labs. There's a solidify tool plugin. I'm not sure if that allows this or not.
Unfortunately, I was going to also suggest the bevel tool. You can kind of do a parametric bevel with the bevel tool, or extrude with a bevel as well. So I've got this weird thought, which is, I want to make it dynamic because essentially this is a question for when it gets dynamic. So I'm going to make the sphere a collider body. We'll make the plane a soft body. Now, you can't, does it like I'm going to make an instance of this. And does an instance even work? I'm going to hide the original. Yeah, it just, oh, wait, you can't hide the original. You have to put it into a null and hide the null. Does that still run? Yeah, see, it doesn't move with it. Now that moves. Could we trick this? This would be weird. I've never done this. I'm going to try putting a rigging, a constraint tag, and lock this to the PSR also of the dynamic object. It's a little bit weird, but would that actually move it in the same way? It kind of seems to. That's interesting. Now, let's get rid of a bunch of the shear and the flexion. It's so low poly that it's not very floppy. Now let's see. Okay, if we unhide it, are there actually two? Yes, there are two. One is lagging a frame behind. This should calculate after, and we might need it to calculate way after, like after the generator level. And even that, it might not do it. It's an instance, but for the sake of the experiment, it might render correctly. So let's just keep that in mind. I'm going to leave the rest of it default. So that is following it. It's fully dynamic. First of all, I've never done that before. I've never gotten an instance of a soft body working. So if you instance it and tell it to follow the position, it does seem to work, which is cool. But here's the thought is if we take the instance and I put the bevel on there, and I'm going to say I want to do a polygon bevel, you can see it's actually extruding it upward. So if I just extrude that, that's one offset. Let's set that offset to 0. Okay, you can't do 0, I forgot. So we'll do 0.001. So now it's doing a very tiny inner offset, so not visible. But we can extrude this as much as we want. So now it's a separate kind of extrusion. But these are not two separate objects entirely. So I could texture one and texture the other. And now you see they do have two different textures. And they're both doing the same movement. So that should sort of work as well. The last step would be creating a connect object and feeding both of those into the connect. And the connect should maintain the materials. It's going to mess up the fong, so I'm going to set that to manual and make sure that it's using the same fong. Now, the question here is, can we get this to... I mean, I think it would automatically work if we baked it. Actually, oh, look, it automatically worked. The connect seems to have fixed it instantly. It's refreshing properly. So look at that. Now we've got, yeah, there we go. Solved. Actually, this is pretty neat. It's a good method where I was trying to think of an alternative to using the soft body, but now we're using an instant separate object. We do whatever we want in completely different ways. That gives us a lot of power to be able to do that. And I do use bevels to do these fakey extrudes in other circumstances. And what's cool is even, we could push that further. Where right now we are just doing a bevel of a tiny bevel, but we could actually have that push inward, and that should continue to work. And even along those lines, if we made a second bevel, if I make this a child, not of the plane, but the null, and we extrude this negative, then I think we could probably get an inverse extrude on the other side. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just kind of a post effect that's happening after everything. Oh, I guess that's not going to cause a refresh. That might need to go to a connect object now to be acknowledged. But there's a lot of interesting ways that might combine. And that's pretty neat. It's clean. It's logical, and it's even refreshing properly in the viewport. So yeah, I just learned a couple things there. That's a really neat one. Yeah, I like those simple questions where suddenly it's like, hey, we just learned a bunch of things about cinema that we didn't know before. The ramifications. So what do we got? Let's get, let's save this one and cloth. Extrude texture trick.
Andrew had some questions about Python. There's some great tutorials on Cineversity about how to do some stuff with Python, so I'd suggest that he checks those out.
Yeah, I don't know much about the data types and anything. I mean, I've only ever kind of coded in Cinema, so I don't have another baseline outside of it. I've always found Python to be pretty intuitive. Although something important to note is, isn't it essentially that Python's implementation in Cinema is effectively, for all purposes, it's like it's a C++ plugin that's like interfacing between the two, right?
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, and it's also mirroring the C++ API. So some of the way that the data types work and everything is basically set up maybe in a more Maxon C++ API way than a Pythonic way. But the cool thing about that is that if you develop a plugin in Python or a script in Python, it's easier to translate that into a C++ plugin once you need more performance or whatever.
Yeah, and there's a lot of places where you hit the wall in Python. It's like, oh, I do this. It's like, oh, you can go up to this point. But then after that, Python couldn't do it. The implementation of Python couldn't do it, and you have to get the C++. Because Cinema 4D is natively written in C++.
Yeah. Most of the Cinema 4D features are actually developed first as plugins. So the API is even used by our developers to actually make things happen. But the Python API continues to improve more and more and more, and you really don't hit those walls nearly as much. It's really just when you need extra performance that you hit the wall these days.
Excellent. We got a couple people wanting this question, so let's see what we get here. It's another Instagram link. So this one from Travis. Uh-oh, looks crazy. So this is from MoExtrude. So let's see what we got. I got to turn off the audio. Whoa, look at that. That's cool looking. Let's see what we got. Oh, there's a bunch of them. So
which one are we looking at?
This goes once again, Travis. This is he just, I think he likes all of it, but he also says bubble effect, assuming that means the first one. Blip, 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 blip.
Well, the one that's on the it's coming up. That one bubble effect is that one. That looks a lot like something that you did in one of your earlier episodes this season. The soft bodies.
We're trying to. I don't know about that. Like any technique I've done, because I don't know how I would approach this. I mean, and we could potentially assume that this technique is very similar to what's happening here. Not necessarily. Like there might be. Honestly, actually, look, I mean, I'm almost more feeling that these might just be refractive spheres being cloned out to the surface. Like I'm not really feeling.
They're just growing in scale, and then there may be a little bit of dynamics to keep them from colliding.
There does seem to be a soft bodiness. Some of them are squishing around, but these do just seem to be soft body spheres growing on the surface. And then they're just a really cool refractive material that's seeing through it. You actually see, if you kind of frame by frame, that this is not that material stretched. It's actually a refraction potentially of that material. But it's a very stylized refraction. So I'm wondering if that is like a refraction that's ignoring the material and it's just looking at the sky type of thing. But it's really convincing that this is like the surface inflating. It's crazy that this effect and this effect, this one, they look so similar, and I think they're done in completely unrelated ways. So yeah, I think that these might just be soft bodies growing. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, it has another Zachary Corzine type of vibe where it feels like we're morphing from one shape to another. And the way that they're kind of busheled up, really, the artistic direction on this is gorgeous. Yeah, I really like that. I'm looking at the separation here. I'm trying to think of, can we do a basic version of this? Just like essentially the growth effect. Would that be something that sounds interesting to you, Rick?
Sure.
But then we also had this one, which is also sort of the bubble effect. And like I'm curious a couple levels, because if you look here, do you see this? We've got geometry here. So it's like we've got these potentially rigid parts and soft parts. So okay, that's a potentially a thing. But I don't know how I would go about doing this, because it's like you'd have to, each of these would need, you could increase your rest length. So like maybe this interior geometry and the exterior geometry are actually physically separate models. This is for cinema purposes, because I think this said it might have been done in Houdini.
They said the one in the circle was done in Houdini.
Yeah.
First of all, let's credit who did the.
Yeah, it's MHSprod.
But there's multiple references down there.
Oh yeah. Oh man, a bunch of their screen names here. Well, I'll be linking this directly. But yeah, first creation. So, oh man, can you pronounce any of these names? There's so many of them.
Well, these are different people on different ones.
Yeah. Lavrinov.
Maxime Hecard, maybe.
Enzo Crema. Maxime, yeah, again. Quentin, was that French?
Yeah, I'm not even going to try that one.
Well, a lot of people are involved here, but yeah, there's a lot of gorgeous sequences all over the place here.
That one in the circle that we were just on, the beginning of that makes me think of like a collision deformer type of a thing, but it won't be able to hold up as you make them bigger. So I'm wondering if there's like a transition you could cheat there or something.
The only thing that could do this is soft bodies. So then it goes to if we locked, they'd have to be locked on the edges, and there's no way to lock well, you'd have to very manually lock the edges. We actually found out in the bonus stream that you could actually use a series of springs essentially as a belt tag, and we actually got it working way better than I thought we would. But we had to create 1,000 springs to do all these little interconnections to lock those, and then you could animate the rest length, animating up, or animate a vertex map, but they wouldn't be stuck in that particular position. And that to me is the tricky part here. But soft bodies would be the only thing that could do these really nice collisions on top of each other. Yeah, which is to me the impressive part of this one. So I can think of how to make these cell shapes. I could think of how to inflate them. They would collide really nicely. You could use a connect object to have the static and the not and the animated become a single mesh. But how do you stick them to the edges? That's the tricky part. Unless that'd be crazy. I want to do a quick, if you'll indulge me for a moment here, Rick.
Yeah.
I want to do a micro test of this and just see if the theory is good. So let's see. Once again, let's get some materials to distinguish here. I'm going to actually move a floor slightly downward, and then we've got this plane. We're going to make it higher poly, but we don't want to go crazy. So let's do 50 by 50. I think we should be able to handle that. I'll do 40 by 40. Gotta be careful when you're live streaming. And then here's the thought: is trapping it. Dropping a different object on it. So what's a quick way of doing this? I'm going to make a second shape here, set it to 3 by 3, make this editable. I'm just going to eyeball this, but I'm going to hit MO, the slide tool, and slide some of these around and just get a couple of varied little shapes going here. Not quite square. So nothing crazy there. So now I select all those. I for inner extrude, turn off preserve groups, and do something like that. So that is now a completely separate model. And if we give this a lot of weight and drop it, we can, instead of binding everything, we'll just physically pin it down. So let's see, simulation, collider body on the floor. This one will be a soft body. And then this will be a collider. Well, I guess it could also just be a collider body, so it can't even move. Yeah, that's probably the best idea. So if we move this down, this is going to get potentially messy. Now, in the end, I don't think we'd actually be viewing that mesh, but I'm going to leave it there for now. And let's make it very clear what we're seeing by making a second material. Make a nice green on there. So here's a thought. That soft body, it's dynamically just going to fall to the ground. That's fine. This is a collider body. It can't go anywhere. If we were to create a wind, yeah, this might work. Let's create a wind and have the wind blow upward. And set that to 55, which is a number in which we'll very obviously see the effect. So now you can see that we're getting a little bit of inflation there. So if we start increasing that value, I don't want to go crazy, so let's keyframe it. I'm going to keyframe the wind speed here, and then as we slowly get to 55, I'm going to go up to 10 times the amount, and let's see what that does. It might. I'm going to save. This is a dangerous test. Not that we spent that much time on it, but no reason to lose it. In full inflating soft body. Chris. Okay, let's let that keyframe upward. It should start inflating more and more and more. It's holding up pretty well so far. I wouldn't be surprised if it slips through. Yeah, some of those corners are going to slip through. We can definitely get around that. We can pin a couple of those corners. We can shrink. I'm going to just shrink the shape so there's a little bit of something on the edge for them. So now here's where things maybe could get interesting for us. This is just the wind doing this part of it. So if we let this pre-roll up to about frame 30, and then we go to our cloth here, at this frame, I'm now going to start animating our rest length. So let's go one more frame forward, keyframe rest length, and then over the course of the wind's still getting stronger and stronger. So I might stop the wind at that strength, but let's double our rest length over that time frame, and we'll go back to 30 and grab the wind. I'm going to say the wind should be that strength at this time, and I'm going to delete this keyframe. So we should get up to this point, and then the rest length will take over and start growing there. And then before I forget, I'm just grab all these tags and crank, get rid of all the bounce, and go crazy on the friction. So 222 on the friction. And let's see. So this should go up to about 30, and then it's suddenly going to start getting a lot more length, which is going to enable them to stretch. Maybe not so much inflate. Yeah, they're stretching. That's cool. But how do we get them to inflate? I would think that they need individual forces inside of each of them to be like pushing outward. But you don't want them kind of affecting the local section. Tricky.
I almost just wonder if we even just put could you put spheres inside of where each of those are going to come up, and then keyframe dynamics to be enabled after it's going to be inflated enough?
The only problem with that
it's not going to be smooth though.
Well, I think that would actually work pretty well. The problem would be once the spheres, the big trick here that makes it look so cool is at a certain moment they intersect each other, and it's like this inflation of them pushing against each other.
Right.
These actually push against each other. If there's spheres inside of them inflating, then those would start passing through the surfaces of the other spheres and the other neighbors, and then they would be pinched in between two places it couldn't go. So it would limit it there. But I mean, in the same way you're saying we could do a couple of spheres there, I mean, there's no reason we couldn't keyframe
an attractor or something.
Yeah, I'm just thinking we could clone. Yeah, we can clone it. We can clone an attractor. So I made a copy of this. I'm gonna fill in these holes again. Fill in. Just because this is gonna be the quickest way to get those, and then hit UI, delete. Now we can clone onto the surface of this one, and cloner, and then simulate, and we can use an attractor. I wonder if would be some trick with field forces that would work well here, but let's just try using an attractor for now. I'm going to clone onto an object. The object will be these clone thing. I guess I clone at the polygon center, and the attractor, there's going to be a bunch of attractors and it needs to fall off. which we should now be able to see get cloned. And I guess, yeah, I do want it to get weaker near the edge. It should be bigger so they pass through each other. And if we are so inclined, we can enable scaling. So they're going to be a little bit more, the big ones will be bigger based on the polygon it currently is cloned onto. That's kind of something. I don't know if it'll work, but I do think that, well, I was surprised in certain conditions, you can clone forces, which is crazy to me, but you totally can. Let's go negative 100 on the attraction. I'm going to really slow down our speed limit because we don't need it to go fast. Now, immediately, they're pushing away. So I'm going to start with these being lower. So I'm going to actually scoot this down. And let's just see what it looks like for the first few frames. I'm going to save again. And actually, you know, I'd love to do it. Let's turn off the wind and just let the attractor do the work. So this is just the attractor pushing upwards. You can see it's doing something. So if we make the attractor 1,000, then it's now going to be pushing up a lot. And now I'm just going to, we're just doing a little stress test here. I'm going to try scooting this up into the air so that they're centered a little bit. And those should start getting inflated outward. It's pretty funky. They're definitely getting a little bit more of an inflated vibe. I mean, it's cool. It's not, I mean, we could increase the stats per frame because some of these are passing through the hidden layer, but oh man, are they just not big enough, or is the wind just not strong enough here? There's a couple different attractor.
It may just be a density thing, a polygon density thing, that there's not enough.
Yeah, we could increase the rest length some more. And
yeah,
I mean, I essentially want to see them push into each other, but there might be a limit on that because as these attractors pass through each other, they're going to cancel each other out for all purposes. So there might be a natural equilibrium here.
Somebody on chat suggesting volume pressure. I don't know if that will do anything since it's not a volume.
I wonder if we did make it a volume, if that could do something. That's a weird, dangerous thing to try, but I'm down. Well, let's do that and then move on.
Basil CMR1, just for credit.
Yeah, let's do that. Now it's creating a lot of redundant polygons, which is the slightly unfortunate part, but it's worth a try. So let's see, what do we have? I'm going to temporarily turn off the attractors, the attractor system, and we need the trap to be above it. Then the cube needs its, I'm going to go lower poly just because we also have them on the side and we have them, we don't need those vertical ones. We have them on the side and the bottom. We could reduce the polys down there, but let's just give it this test. Just stealing the tag off of it, turn off the original. So that's going to increase the rest length, which is fine. But you're also saying increase the pressure. I kind of want to keyframe that up. Let's see if this works at all. Oh, we need the wind back on. And then the wind, we might want to tell it only affects certain vertex maps because this is actually going to be blowing. Oh, how do we do this? I don't want it to pull the bottom part up. So we could make a linear fall off set to, I always get the wrong, I'm going to say Z minus, but I probably have it backwards. We set this really small. I'm going to set it to 1 because sometimes you go to 0. Certain systems don't like it. Okay, so if I did this right, the top will move, but it didn't, so I think I got it backwards. Maybe. C plus. Well, it is pushing up, so okay, I did get it backwards. So the wind should pretty much just be affecting the top, so that wind should be pushing upward. Now, once that wind goes up high enough, we have to ignore the edges for now, but once this wind goes up high enough, could we... I don't want to ignore those edges that much. So I'm going to actually do a loop selection. I'm going to say select boundary edge. Oop, no, that still doesn't want to grab it. So I'm going to do a very quick selection here. I want edges, so let's go to a rectangle selection and do that, that, and that. D for extrude, extrude outward there. That should trap it better. And now we hit play. Those should push up. And then we will keyframe. Okay, it's going to get nuts. But right around here, let's start increasing the pressure. Pressure, I don't know how far we want to go, so I'm going to hold down Alt to jump up to frame 55. And do you know what the scale of pressure is here? I don't have an intuitive vibe. Do we want to go like 1, 10, 100?
I feel like it's smallish. Right, yeah, I feel like 10 pressure is a lot of pressure.
All right, I'm going to go back to 30, so we should be able to continue from there. And now the pressure should start keyframing its way up. So it's going to pressure, pressure, pressure. I mean, it's doing something, but it's very uneven. But this, I don't know.
That's not unlike what the source was doing, kind of. But it's not closing the gaps right now.
Yeah. Well, this one inflated nicely, but it doesn't feel like the pressure is being uniformly applied. Like it's almost like the pressure didn't do anything over here, but it's doing quite a bit here. And then we're not seeing it because it's hidden below this trap. The trap shape, but it also is probably inflating a lot on these sides as well. So I just don't know the way the pressure algorithm works to see how it's applying in this situation. I don't know. It's hard to tell. And then maybe 10 seemed like a lot, but maybe 10, maybe we can go higher. I'm just going to manually do it, kill off the pressure, and let's go up to 22. See if it explodes. See that 1, 2, those two are doing a lot. That one seems, a couple of them seem to have a little bit, but some are being ignored. So I think pressure, the way pressure is calculated is a little more specific, is a good idea. And maybe if these were a series of individual shapes, it could work. And I don't see any reason it couldn't be. You could totally trap a bunch of them and create a surface on one side or another. It's something to explore. Hit me up with that question maybe again next week when I'm by myself, and I might explore that some more. But let's try and jump onto something, especially something that we can have a guest more involved in. Trey is saying, what is wrong with this? Dynamics and dumping. What is wrong with this is an interesting question. What does that mean? Is it like your own Instagram? It is your own Instagram. I don't really do critique. I don't feel qualified, but let's take a look. I mean, it's kind of a direct question of a project you're working on. So it's your own render. You're saying what's wrong with it. I mean, you get nice twitchy cans. You put a glitchy thing on top of it to try and make it look wrong. But based on what you're saying,
it's not supposed to be glitchy.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what it should be doing. What is wrong with this? Dynamics, dumping objects out of the box through an emitter infinitely. So, okay, he's emitting objects dynamically, and it's twitching around. Is that? I mean, it's also calculating so fast. Like it feels like you're at 10 times speed. There's a lot of movement.
Constantly glitchy and quick like that. I'm just wondering if it's a scene scale issue.
Do you want to build a version of that, Rick? Just some cylinders.
Sure.
Emitting? All right, jumping back on your screen. I mean, it's a fun dynamics question, so it does. For good stream content.
And it fits me. Although I'm going to change the Diet Coke to Diet, or the Diet Pepsi to Diet Coke. But if we were to do something like this for our box, and we'll just kill that edge, and then we'll create an emitter. See, I haven't even learned where everything moved to.
You can find it in the simulate menu at least. I don't think it's in one of those buttons.
And we'll just move this up in here. Close enough. And I mean, really, you don't need, You don't need Mograph or Dynamics for this. You could just because they need to collide with each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll take our cylinders. Obviously, they need to be smaller. Oh, that's 3 of them already. There we go.
You're going to clone onto the particles, or would you just apply the dynamics directly to the particles?
Yeah, I guess you really don't need exactly. You could just do.
What's cool is you get a lot of control from the clones, and I think that workflow would totally work.
Yeah, and I was just trying to show that workflow. So we can just go into Object and Emitter, and we'll want to add a simulation rigid body to this. We'll want to add a simulation rigid body to the floor. I always tell people to add color to things, and then I always forget to do it myself. So we'll do that, and we'll go in here, and we'll do this, and just make it. Okay. Oh, and we need to make the box needs to be
static mesh.
Yes. So we'll copy this and off static mesh. The emitter's a little far back, so they're sneaking out the back. Let's see what's going on here. I think if we get the emitter sized a little bit more appropriately.
Yeah, they're probably partly passing through the walls at birth anyway, so.
Yeah. So there we go.
Yeah. I'm curious.
And then the thing that you always need to do is, well, the friction's pretty high here already.
But they'll roll.
I think I would increase the friction a little bit more here.
It might need some. Was that
more frame?
Was that just friction that you did?
Yeah.
Oh. Because I didn't think that would stop the rolling. It's stopping them from sliding out. They'll get forced out, which is cool. But yeah, they'll still roll. So I was just going to suggest a little bit of more angular damping. Like 50 on the angular damping would stop them from rolling for almost infinitely. Because you still want them to roll for a little while, but eventually stop. And then just
kind of cool how they get shoved out.
Yeah. Well, and the emitter is probably stopping after a few frames, so keep it going. Crank that to infinity.
I'll do it the Chris way.
There you go. Now, let's throw in the extra variable. Trey is saying that he had the box moving as well. So maybe make the emitter a child of the box and vibrate the box. But I don't think that'll change anything.
You
just have to make sure it's a moving mesh and not a static mesh.
Not sure what our scale is here, so...
It's always super fast. Yeah, the frequencies have to be at like, well, I'm fine with it shaking all crazy, but yeah, frequency's usually pretty dang fast. Yeah, that's still working great. I like it.
Let's just give it a little bit of color just for fun.
Yeah, they're stacking nicely. Well, and because you did the cloner method, we should add some sort of special variety or something. Because
yeah, totally. So let's add a plane effector. No, let's add a random effector. I guess it really doesn't matter. We'll turn this to effector color. So now we're getting different colors there.
The colors look better if you set it from 0 to 100 instead of negative 100 to 100, because it's forcing them into like the super negative colors.
And then we can add a We'll add a Lambertian at the bottom, and we'll set that to the Mograph color. And we'll add some Fresnel here. Actually, it's going to be pretty reflective, so we probably don't want the Lambertian at all. We probably just want to change the metallic color.
Sure.
We'll do this, but crank up the IOR a lot, and then Mograph color. And did that work? Did I skip a step?
Oh, you can see the slight tint on them.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So we probably do want the Lambertian with the Mograph color.
And then turn off the color channel if you're going with a kind of a physical workflow.
Oh, right. That's what I was looking for. Thanks.
There you go. And then we need something to reflect, but
maybe a little more roughness. Not really. And then, yeah, we could grab a sky. Maybe grab a HDRI.
And yeah, if you put these all on the emitter, then you wouldn't be able to get the color variety. And even here, the dynamics are all being driven via the cloner. So this will all work perfectly. And you could put different scale. You could be cloning several different types of objects. Like half of these could be cubes. Mm-hmm. There could be, you could do all sorts of energy by putting multiple clones in there.
Yeah, in fact, let's do that. Let's just create. We'll move away from the Coke cans a little bit and
make some Coke spheres.
Drop some spheres and some cones. I don't know why I'm scaling them because it doesn't matter.
No, it does. The relative scale matters. Yeah,
that's kind of cool.
If we were to, what it would happen if you pause and rewind to 0, but if you were to copy the dynamics tag to each of those individual objects, would that still continue to work as it is? And if so, okay, yeah, that still works. So just for curiosity, could you grab the sphere and give it maybe not the sphere, maybe the cone. Grab the cone's dynamics and give it a custom initial velocity and see if we could like make it so that the cones want to launch their way out of the box really fast, but the other two are coming out more slowly. So for like, the reason I'm asking is I'm curious if the custom initial velocity comes along with the clone or if it's going to be based off the particle.
Right. Okay. There we go.
So I think it's a really strong positive X.
X, is that what I'm looking for?
Yeah, I think so. That might be subtle. Put an extra 0 or 2 on there. No need to be subtle when you're testing.
Nope, it 0. Didn't.
Pew, 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 pew. Okay, yeah. And it's knocking all the other ones out. So you could add custom information on there. So those could have custom spin on several. So even let's just say these were cans, you're doing a bunch of different cans. You can have some of the cans have a bunch of spin on them, or have different initial rotations. It's just I
love how the box is actually shoving the pile forward at the end.
Yeah. Well, no, but even the box is introducing that forward motion, and then just as soon as you start emitting something, it's like, oh, it's full of infinite objects. And the box shaking actually does add a lot to the illusion of like, this isn't just like this fakey stream. It's like, no, the box is shaking. There's life to it. So it's going to keep on exploding more objects forward. Blup, blup, blup. Let's see. Yeah, Trey, I would just tackle it again from scratch and just go step by step. It's a good idea to build the basic kind of skeleton of the scene, get the functions working, and then start adding all the detail. Like, do it with a cylinder before like a full can, or even if you are doing the full can here, you could actually run the simulation on these low, like Rick is running really low poly cylinders, and the cans might be really high poly, but you could make a second cloner to follow the position of the first cloner so that you could run low poly simulations I think you could also
you don't even really have to do that. You could have like a high dynamic can, and then just go in here and set the shape to another object on the tag.
Yeah, it turned into a cylinder, and it would.
Like if I take this cylinder here, let's see. I don't follow the rules. I edit while I'm.
Yeah, changing dynamics while it's playing is so dangerous.
So if I do this and I go in and let's just make this like. Let's just crank this, right? And just to prove it's cranked, we'll add like a displacer to it.
This is a messed up Coke can.
Oh yeah, so it's.
Oh yeah, it's just in the same.
There we go.
Oh, there you go. I don't want to drink that can anymore.
No, this is one that's been actually. We can probably dense. 2, 1.
Yeah, that looks pretty cool. I never thought of using dents as a dent.
Anyway, you could play with that a little bit, but then what you can do is go in here and say use another object, and we'll use this cylinder.
Oh yeah, I never do that.
Instead, and then let's hide that cylinder. Oh, and turn the cloner back on.
Yeah, that should be going really slow with all the. If those were dynamic, that'd be crazy long simulation time.
Yeah, I mean, it has slowed down a little bit, but I think that's just because of the level of geometry in the scene, not because of the calculation. If we were to change this to a static mesh, that's not working at all.
Yeah.
So if you go in and say another object,
I don't think.
Or I suppose you could even just say cylinder y-axis.
Yeah, so I was thinking. But I'm glad you did the other one, because I don't think I've ever said use another object before, and it's a really good workflow.
Yeah.
Having said all that, there is still, and I like this method, and I'll be doing this more often. There is still validity in what I was saying, that you could still run the entire simulation on a low poly, because it's really, you could easily turn on and off the high poly stuff, but still see your low poly simulation, and have it be really low. But of course you could still swap these out, but turning out checkbox is really quick. Zalam, that was just about seeing the calculation time, not about it actually moving. And you could see how slow it went. But yeah, another object. Great tip there, Rick. Okay, we're already actually 20 minutes over. Do you got to go, Rick? Or do you want to hit one more question? Feel free to say no. You're very generous with your time.
I could take a quick question, but I probably need to be wrapping up soon. My email's been blowing up while we've been doing this.
Uh-oh. And yeah, we need Rick to get back to work for new features in cinema. All right, I'm going to jump back to my screen to click a link. Range Attacker was really quick with a link. So let me go ahead and give this a quick looky-loo. Make sure the volume is down. All right. This is from Renzo Reyes. It's the UA process reel, which is Under Armour. So some sort of cloth stuff. Ooh, neat. Now, specifically, they were asking 28 seconds in. So, okay. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Okay, let's jump to right around here. Ooh, look at that. Oh, they even show a little bit of there behind the scenes. It looks like it could be cinema.
Yeah. I feel like that looks like just that same pressure that we were doing, but they're using it on an actual soft body, and they've used a vertex map maybe to control the pressure. I'm not even
feeling soft body sims on here. These are intersecting each other when they want to. Like, I don't feel like these are avoiding intersection. So to me, this feels like a volume, like running some sort of, like growing a system, like somebody's like shooting out, doing it, put into a volume and just doing a lot of displacement on the volume. If it's pretty highly subdivided.
Yeah, you might be right. That might just be animation noise on a displacer.
Do you know what? Is there any noise that kind of gives you this vibe? What noise does that look like?
Because I don't know. I have a coaster that shows me all the noises, but I don't have it here in front of me. Chris gave me a coaster one year. This 3D. It was. I guess it was etched, right?
Yeah, it's a laser cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, the laser cutter that's sitting. Well, it's just off screen over there behind me. Yeah, this one's. Yeah, I think that displacement. Well, here's a question for you, Rick. What would your approach be? Because I got a couple of different methods I would be, but assuming that we're taking some shapes and we're going to feed them into a volume and let them just kind of blob into each other, what would be your approach to doing something like that right there? Like put it up, like this really great growing arm look. And I mean, and just to double down, I do feel like it's noises because you can see it feels like it's passing through noise instead of being a consistent thing moving forward. Like as this moves forward, it feels like we're passing through a cloud of noise to me. But yeah, what would your approach be for this kind of like?
Oh, I think the simplest thing would even just be to like take a sweep and clone on that sweep, on the surface of that sweep, and then grow the sweep out.
Okay, that's a simple way. What would be a more complex way?
What's a more asked for the simple way, didn't you?
No, I asked what your way would be.
Well, that would be my way. I'd take the easiest route possible.
Well, let me modify the question. What would be something a little bit more like staccato? Something that's like, it has more of like this bursting. It's like it bursts out. Like it's almost like a stepped energy where it's like you get uneven motion moving forward.
I almost feel like the most art directable way of doing it would be to set it all up the way you want it, whether it be from a clone setup or even manually placing things, and then control the visibility of that cloner with an effector. But I'm not sure how that works with volumes or the scale.
Well, I think at volumes, it just goes to we're feeding it raw geometry, and if it moves in whatever kind of rate, that'll just pop into existence, but the volume will just take it into account then. So I think that would work. I
think if you want to show my screen, we can tackle this. I mean, what I was even thinking is, so if we do something like, let's just do an arc, and we'll just clone. See, I still want some shape to it, so I think I would go ahead and put it in a sweep.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can grab like an end side and
I think it was already correct.
Yeah, it was right. And then we can go into the sweep itself and kind of adjust the scale. Sort of like that.
Mm-hmm.
We could even, have some control over that. Let's make this inside a little bit thicker. And then let's clone. Let's take cubes.
Yeah, cubes are good.
And let's clone those onto the sweep.
Yeah, nice.
And we'll make the cubes smaller. And we'll crank this up. And then if we were to just take a just take a plane effector and scale. And then we'll add a fall off.
Good old fall offs.
And let's let's see here. I guess we want to invert this. All right. And then this is like, there's other ways to solve this, but the cool thing is that now we can use the decay effector or the decay field and just set maximum, and that way.
Oh, I see.
Wait.
Interesting.
Isn't it decay? Chris,
Yeah.
help me.
It would be, yeah, it's decay.
Okay.
Decay, and then, yeah, I mean, it has to play because it's frame dependent.
Oh, right. Okay. So then we can just sort of, actually, let's do this. Let's align to spline onto the arc, and see. So this is an interesting thing because I don't necessarily want it to start there, right? So I'm wondering if we can take a MoSpline just to bring it back around.
Yeah, why not?
And we'll put this in spline mode, put the arc in the spline, and let's hide everything but the arc and the MoSpline for a second. And then we want to extend, so we'll go this way and that way. And now we can use align to the MoSpline rather than the arc. So we've gotten some additional. We're able to start beforehand now.
And the great part about that is if you were to update the arc, your MoSpline will also update. So it's a very parametric setup.
So we've got something like, and turn the clunder back on. So the interesting thing. What's going on here? This is the decay, right? That's not working?
No. Well, I mean, turn off the decay for a second to help eliminate variables.
Yeah, the decay is not.
The decay
max.
doesn't.
No?
No. If you look at the decay, if you turn it off, we're not seeing the cubes grow to their. Oh, wait, there it is there when you turn it off.
We did this.
It's inverted, so you might need the minimum.
Ah, there we go.
Yeah, okay. It's because you did the invert.
Yeah, okay. There we go. Okay. And so then, you might want it to pop a little bit more. So what we could do is go into here and actually add like a quantize even maybe. Maybe it needs to go there.
Yeah, that would make sense. Well, that's going to make it jump from from almost no power until it's at full power-esque thing, right?
Yeah, that was kind of the idea I had. We could also try like just a remap, but we want that probably before the decay. No, what I'm thinking is you want to have the animation not be smooth, right?
Yeah.
So you almost want to jitter this.
Yeah, you could.
You could use Signal for that. But,
Signal would be excellent for that.
You could also just go in and mess with the keyframes. Like we could go into the timeline, and we could just kind of. We always want to be going up, so
yeah, slowly sort of stepping.
Let's switch this to step, and then kind of do.
Here. Oh, I guess, yeah, it's not going to do the. I guess you wanted it to do that, but still be soft, but double the keyframes and drag them over.
You know what? Here's another. So another thing I was going to suggest that we could do, rather than jittering the keyframes like that, if we were just going to use a stepped thing like this, I wrote a plugin that's available on Cineversity. Of course, if you're going to use a plugin, you could use Signal for this. But I have CV stop motion, and that basically takes any animation track and kind of posterizes it. So Yeah, let's just run it like this. 2. I can't remember which direction it goes. And in fact, it doesn't seem to want to work right now.
Does it maybe not apply the tags? So
it has evaluate tags on.
Oh, interesting. I don't know that. I've never used it. That's cool, though. I didn't know that existed.
Oh, yeah. There. Now it's working. It just needed to be beforehand.
Oh, interesting.
There we go.
Yeah, neat.
Now you're not really getting a jitter that way, which would be cool. But
well, jitter. I'm not sure what you mean by jitter.
Like just kind of jittering the value up and down a little bit, maybe. I don't know. Is a thought.
But there's always so many. There's a million ways of tackling everything. Wait, before you go there, I guess just one little layer that would be cool. I like your stop motion, but it'd be what if you drag that onto a null instead? Move the align the spline and your stop motion tag onto a null. The null will travel, and then you put the spherical field to chase after it with a spring constraint. So then you kind of do have that little bit of overlappy wiggle.
Right. So I'd want to put a constraint here.
Yeah, the rigging constraint. Yeah, and then just have a spring constraint to chase the null. So now the spherical field is constantly trying to get to the stop motion, but it's going to overshoot it. So maybe you might want to step yours more. And yeah, drag is a good idea.
Kind of smoothed it out.
Well, no, it will smooth it out, but I would think that the keyframes has to go higher. Like it would step right now you're stepping every 2 frames would be my guess. So when you want to step every 20 frames.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to stretch out the entire timeline because we're slowing it down.
Right.
We're kind of jumping all over the place. And we could give it fairly minimal spring. And then there's the problem with the spring in that it doesn't jump to the 0 position. You have to like force it to go to a 0 position. And so it's always going to take those first few frames to get to its original position, catch up. Yeah, it's just more layers.
Yeah.
We could, but like we said, we could use signal. You could jitter your F curve, add more keyframes. You could have that null be animated, make the spherical field a child of it, put a vibrate tag on the spherical field. So now there's additional motion moving along with it. Here we did a spring tag technique. There's a lot of different ways of layering it.
But the interesting, like we were starting this from a standpoint of volumes, but the interesting thing about this is that if you aren't doing volumes, these don't have to be cubes. I mean, again, you could go cylinder cone, could scale them down, drop those in the cloner, can randomize, although it doesn't really matter in this case. And maybe you add a push-apart effector. And I like using the scale apart mode.
Yes, I agree. That's the only mode I like.
This can be dropped down quite a bit, and then you can actually don't need those iterations. So you could do something interesting kind of like that maybe. We can bring this radius down a little bit more, it looks like. And we probably want to actually randomize the clone rotation.
Mograph. You just layer and layer and layer and layer. It never stops. But let's go back to the volume.
Yeah, sure. So we can just go back and actually, let me save it at here. And then we'll do that, and we'll create a volume builder. And volume mesher. And it looks like in this case, we're going to want to probably make our clones
Yeah, big old cubes.
Probably get rid of the push aparts because those don't matter anymore.
Yeah, but yeah, these cubes can probably be pretty huge because the effect is the inflation.
And then we'll drop this a little bit.
I guess you could increase your steps again or decrease it because we cranked it up for the spring. Yeah, something like that. And now, I mean, smoothing really slows it down. Although I do like this kind of chunky geometry here, so maybe just leave it at. Well, can you hit NB? Can we see the mesh? Yeah, it's pretty even. So if we were to just start throwing some displacement on top of here at a relatively large scale, then we might get something pretty good. Because this is, once again, we're passing through a volume of noise. So a nice large noise that's got some definition. Yeah. And then give it more displacement. Ooh, there you go. Boom. And what's great is as we're passing through the noise, you see how those kind of grow in. Like, that's what I love about that.
And then you add like a little bit of that.
Yep, a little bit of animation speed on there.
Maybe a little bit more.
Well, even on top of that, like I could imagine growing the cubes inside the clone. Like those could slowly be growing more, so totally. They're not left behind. You could, oh man, there's so many different layers on top of that. You could not do. Sadly, you could not do a jiggle deformer. Sorry, EJ. Oh, there you go. I like seeing the cubes kind of come out. We get that double. Oh, there you go. Now it's looking gross. That's great. I wonder if you could. We shouldn't do it, but something that popped in my head. I was thinking about jiggle deformer. I wonder if you could do some fakey stuff with a jiggle deformer where you make an unrelated mesh that's kind of like the sweep, and the sweep you kind of just pass this through as like a inflation displacer, and then you run a jiggle deformer on that, and then you run a mesh deformer on that. So then you could deform this final mesh based on a mesh that existed the entire time. So you can get that. You can get a jiggle effect with a constantly changing mesh. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that'd be interesting.
I don't know if it. I think it would work. So yeah, I mean, essentially, and I think the reference we were looking at is just getting the right noises layered up, and you just keep on. If we kept on increasing the density here, if we kept on making the volume smaller and smaller, then this is going to look smoother and smoother and have more and more detail.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways this could grow. I mean, we just spent all the time putting the cloner in there, but this could just be the sweep being animated. Field forces could be layering up. This could be particle growth. This could be emitter keyframed along a spline emitting out objects that are slowing down slowly, but there's a turbulence, so it'd still be breaking apart a little bit. And this is when you just start playing with Mograph. It's like, okay, this is an absolutely endless rabbit hole.
Yep. Totally.
In the best possible way.
Which is really the beauty of Cinema 4D, right? It's the ability to experiment and just keep layering stuff up in the object manager like this, and oh, that looks cool. Oh, that's even cooler, and it just keeps growing.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, but put a layer. But even just how this is super parametric. If you grab your arc and you set this to 180 instead of just 90, then everything will be updated and we'll get a fuller arc. It'll still animate along that line. It'll still expand before it and after it, so that it still will be erased at the beginning, and everything else will just update. And it's all fed to a volume, so the poly mesh is staying, or the mesh density is staying even.
Well, and if you want to get really crazy, you can even do things like add a random effector to the MoSpline itself. Yeah. And we could even add a noise. Let's drop the... I'm changing things during playing, like we're not supposed to.
Constantly, yeah. At least there's no dynamic tags this time. It seems to be changing the curl. Oh, it is changing the base mesh. I guess we got so much other undulation going that we're just not seeing.
There's a lot going on here now. But I just kind of wanted to show that was possible, you know? I think that's kind of cool too.
But what's kind of great, I mean, I'm kind of viewing this is like some alien worm. It's got this curly tongue sticking out now. It's super like awesome and terrible.
Well, and let's just keep, I mean, you know, this is you really can just end up going through the rabbit hole. But like we could add a wind.
What would the wind be? What could the wind affect?
Well, the MoSpline, it can actually be affected by the wind. Actually, it is right now.
I don't know if I knew that. I might have known that. I'm not sure. But if I did know that, I forgot it. So that's cool. But
although it seems like there may be a priority thing because the wind is... Oh, no, there we go. It just was because I was playing.
I'm curious how the wind...
MoSpline needs more points, so you can go in here and... it's vertex. Let's count. Can increase the count of the MoSpline.
Now it's got a curly tail.
And let's bring the wind down.
Boing, boing, boing. I wonder if the volume, because it's not, I mean, I can see the thing tracing its way down, but it stops after a little bit. I wonder why the volume isn't getting created. Oh, the sweep. The sweep creates the geometry that we're cloning onto. So the reason we're not seeing it filter all the way through is we need to pull the arc out of the sweep and feed the MoSpline in instead, and then I think the entire rig will go. Although it might be a little bit crazy, you might want to hit save before you drag it in. Oh, there you go. Oh.
That's cool.
Yeah, there you go. And you get those crazy curly tails. And the sweep is still traveling along it. So these are being cloned onto this. Well, I guess the cubes get so big, it probably the detail goes away. But if we, if you had all sorts of like modifiers to stop them from scaling too big near the edge of the tail, it could get really thin near the edge. But man, that is not something I'd want to bump into anywhere.
Yeah. Well, and the sweep is based on the MoSpline now. So if we scale, if we add effectors to randomly scale if we take this random effector, can we simplify this again? Let's see, hang on, let's save as. If we can.
What color should we make it, everybody?
Clean some of this up that we've done. Okay, so just going back to that level for now.
Wait, what did you change that's making it stretchy?
I just turned a whole bunch of stuff off.
Oh, weird. Because look at it's got this really... Oh, I guess the lack of rotation means that all of the clones might be aligned. And so we're getting these ridges along the side.
Yeah, let's see here.
Which is really cool. Yeah. The clones are aligned with the spline. So without that rotation, there's more of a form to it. I like the randomness, but it was neat that we can get that like kind of consistency.
Well, and the other thing that's interesting here is that if I go to this random, so right now it's based on position, right? But if I go through and instead I adjust the scale, let's just do 555. We should see that the MoSpline is going to randomize the... Oh, that's too much, I guess.
It's also... Is it going everywhere? Is it just on the tip? There's like a drip shape now.
Yeah, full circle. Yeah, why is that happening? Do we have a fall off? No.
I think we did. It goes to how... I don't know.
It may just be this noise. Like if we... Whoa.
I don't even know anymore.
But anyway, you can kind of see it here. The point I was trying to make is that you can use effectors to control the scale of the spline, and that's actually going to control the scale of the sweep, because when you're using MoSpline, oh, this is counteracting it. That's part of the problem. Reset all.
Interesting.
Should be.
Oh, I guess I sort of understand, but I still know way it is getting offset. I mean,
so like if we adjust this width, that should be adjusting the width of the spline. But why is...
It seems to only, like, the MoSpline's only being a MoSpline on those extended areas. Wait, turn the random back on here.
See, the width here is actually adjusting the width. So if we use an effector, let me just create a new effector. Let's just use a step effector. And if we were to drop that in here, God, this box is too small. Got to complain to a developer about that.
That's how we get features changed. We'll just bring Rick on a live stream. He'll be frustrated with something we try and do, and then it'll get fixed.
Well, you've seen it happen at NAB and SIGGRAPH before, where a developer is sitting there watching somebody's presentation and...
Joel is saying put the MoSpline in the sweep. Oh,
yeah.
Oh no, that was earlier.
Did that a while ago.
Yeah. It's only affecting the... Yeah, I agree, Zalam. It seems to only be affecting the extended, like the pre-extended and the post-extended. I don't know why, but yeah, that's fine.
See, even that's interesting. You know, it's like...
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, just the cubes. Yeah. We'll get them all tied up a little bit, or a little bit, make it go all crazy again.
Yeah, actually, I'm just going to... we'll save that little experiment as E and then go back to D. Because D was working better, I think.
Yeah, this one's grosser anyway. So everybody wanted a black, shiny material on here. And then we can wrap up, I think. But let's get an HDR and a gross black, slimy material.
So let's grab an HDR. I don't have... Actually, I probably do have HDR Kit or some HDR browser, but just... Okay.
Some HDR, yeah.
And let's just render tags, compositing...
Joel's asking if it would be possible to generate, create different shading depending on the inflation. I think so. We don't have to pursue it, but it goes to. We are using a noise shader to drive it, so that same noise shader might be able to be applied to extract a little bit of color.
Actually, what would be interesting is maybe if we put that into the roughness.
Oh, yeah.
So that...
Well, that's silver. We need to make it black.
We also need to invert that shader.
Yeah, kill the color shader. Or the color layer.
I was going to... filter this and do it that way.
Well, it seems, yeah, okay, now you can see that there's definitely dark areas. I don't know how much they're going to correspond, and it could go to the kind of thing where you have to, like, you can't bake, I don't think you bake the texture on something that's being generated by the volume, but yeah, I don't know. But it's like baking it pre-displacement. I don't know if that's a thing or not. But let's add a heavy Fresnel in here.
Yeah, so...
And then kill the color channel.
I always forget that.
There you go. Now, if you don't make it look gross, we got to get rid of all that roughness. It's got to be shiny.
Okay. I'll put a little in.
Okay, grosser. I guess we need a lot of Fresnel, but...
More for now, you think?
Well, yeah, I don't know. I usually go to the... you just want those little highlights, but... The... Yeah, works for me.
I wonder what happens if we paste that shader here, too. And maybe colorize it.
Colorizer. Oh, there's definitely a couple hints of blue coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's just in the color, so it's just where the reflection is.
Well, we could always just...
Oh, yeah, you need the slimy layer on top of it. Yeah, I get the hints of blue. It's hard to tell with my resolution here if the blue is corresponding to the middle of the spots or not, but
yeah, I think it is kind of. The thing to remember is the spots are the displacement and the cubes randomizing at the same time. So
very much so.
Yeah. I feel like we need to go into the HDRI. Look at us here noodling with renders, Chris.
Yeah, we shouldn't be doing this. You should just render this out for. Let's let it render for a couple keyframes because it's grossest when it's moving, and then we'll be done. So don't worry. We can go really quick on the render settings. Oh, denoiser. Did you do all keyframes?
Would help if I set it to all frames, though.
It's a thing. Blech. Oh, look, I like the line is rendering. That must be the sweep still has some thickness beforehand, which is almost grosser. It's like this weird umbilical
Oh, yeah, because the sweep is on.
Yeah, that's fine. I like it. Leave it there. It doesn't come out of nowhere then. It's got like this gross fuse that's traveling. Yeah. Not the grossest thing, but it's good. We can just make it it's more of a mercury or a lead type of thing. No, Leo, don't tell Ridley Scott. He's made enough messes as it is. The chat, the old chat was well aware of my hatred for the movie Prometheus.
Oh. Let's just see what we got.
Oh man, look at that. Blah, 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 blah.
That's cool.
It's weird and cool. But yeah, it goes to like it's something that I'm endlessly entertained by, and it's why the show will never. It's always going to be interesting to answer these types of questions. Is if somebody, let's just say somebody had that on their Instagram and someone links to it, it's like, how did they make this? It's like there's like a million different like ways that random effectors could layer up on volumes, could be layering up on dynamics, could be layered up on like who knows where the animation is coming from. Like this is a wind and random effector driven MoSpline, but that could just as easily be a dynamic spline or something being traced. I don't know. It's just, there'd be a million ways of approaching this type of thing. And you just play and tinker and end up with weird fun stuff.
Totally. And I think what's really cool is that, and this is what happens on your show all the time, is that we started from reference, right? But where we ended up was completely different from the reference.
Yeah, so unrelated.
it gave us a creative spark to start working, but we still went from that and created something that was completely different and unique.
Well, if you were to show this to someone, they wouldn't think they couldn't place the reference, and I think that's really important to do whenever you can. I try and stress that in my tutorials when I recorded tutorials, like, hey, take this and make it your own. Like, I hear from companies that are like, why, like we're so tired of seeing demo reels with just your tutorials on there, because if you're just going to literally remake what's in the tutorial, all those like project directors, the people who might hire you, they're like, I've seen this on 10 other demo reels. You got to make it your own.
I agree in principle, but if they're following one of my tutorials, I love it if they just copy it verbatim, because then when I see it on TV, I can say, oh, wow, I did that.
And then,
so feel free to copy my tutorials, guys.
Oh yeah, you
just
guys
don't
can
copy anyone else's
directly. And then again, if anybody's interested, all these scene files are going to be available on the Patreon. And I'm going to jump to my screen real quick while that's still rendering.
Yep.
Oh, not my screen. I'm going to jump to my screen because somebody just posted they were working on that original question we were talking about, and they actually took that image that we were looking at, the reference of I cannot possibly pronounce his name, but it's like,
right.
Well, now it's all literally in Chinese, but it's like licky
this guy. Don't even try.
But
this guy. Or gal.
Yeah,
this person.
They took that image and brought it in, and if you use that as displacement, you're going to get a good relief. So yeah, it just goes back to tying into last week's question of, if you took that 2-dimensional image, you could potentially extract good information from there. But you want to be able to draw your own and make it be whatever you want to draw.
Totally.
Let's take a look at the render where it is, and then.
Oh, sorry, I was cheating and looking at chat.
But yeah, there we go. Blip, 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 blip. I mean, your stop motion tool is great because there is a real, like, the way it's kind of crawling up the lead line. I think it's better, like, that you have this anticipation of the lead line. So I know it's just a weird thing to stumble into.
Yeah.
I thought that we'd need more. I thought that we would need more springiness to the growth, but just this really blatant, like, 20% type of growth is working surprisingly well when you have this much other motion happening.
Totally.
It's pretty interesting. Okay, everybody, I think we're at an hour over, so Rick stayed for a full 3 hours for the stream. So thank you very much, Rick.
My whole office is wondering where I am right now.
Everybody. And then I think you said your family was like, oh, we're going to put the stream on. So I wonder how long they stuck around. So hello, Rick's family.
There's no way they're still watching.
They're like, all right, we watched 2 minutes. That's enough of that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've lost my window. Where's the chat? Chat. I got way too many windows open now.
Oh, I just heard shouting from inside. I think maybe they are still watching.
Yeah, but anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for coming and hanging out. Of course, this could not happen at all without everybody coming in and asking questions and finding cool things that they've discovered and just weird, fun things. And especially a big, huge thanks to Rick. Be sure to follow him on Twitter, and he's working at Maxon, so Cinema 4D.
yeah, and thanks for having me, Chris. This has been fun. It's a fun little break from the usual day to day.
Yep, get you in the thick of it, like the rest of us, where we're in the software and not outside of it, poking it.
Yeah, see, I'm more than just a not pretty face.
Okay, thanks everybody. See you next week for the stream, and then I think 2 weeks from now is the C4D live, so there'll be a bunch of presentations from everybody, and I'll be presenting on Wednesday with a bunch of dynamic ragdoll stuff that originally started as a question on one of the streams. So but I've been trying to push it further. But in any case, that should wrap this up. Thank you so much, everybody, and I'll see you tomorrow on the bonus stream or next week for the regular stream. So bye everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, I'm supposed to go in the credits. There we go.